I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 22 years old, and today I should be celebrating my college graduation. Instead, I'm clutching disownment papers my parents handed me this morning as a graduation gift. Amid the sea of caps and gowns, I watch families embracing their graduates while mine sits stone-faced in the audience. Then something impossible happens. The CEO of Horizon Technologies takes the stage unexpectedly. When he calls my name, every head turns. But nothing compares to watching my parents' expressions shift from disdain to utter disbelief. They literally froze. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt underestimated by people who should have believed in you, most hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. My early childhood memories aren't all bad. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio. Dad worked as a regional sales manager for an office supply company, and Mom taught 4th grade at the local elementary school. Money was tight, but sufficient. I remember weekend picnics at the lake and bedtime stories where Dad would do all the character voices. Everything changed when my brother Andrew arrived when I was 5. From the beginning, it was clear he was special, at least to my parents. The dynamic shifted so gradually that I barely noticed it happening at first. A canceled dance recital to attend Andrew's t-ball game. My science fair projects relegated to the garage while Andrew's finger paintings claimed prime refrigerator real estate. Small things that compounded over time. By the time I was in middle school, the pattern was undeniable. Andrew would bring home C grades and receive celebratory ice cream trips. I'd show my report card full of A-minuses and hear, "Why not all is your, clearly not applying yourself." I started keeping my achievements to myself, learning that sharing good news only invited scrutiny rather than praise. The only adult who seemed genuinely interested in me was my Aunt Sylvia, my mother's older sister. She lived about an hour away and would sometimes take me for weekend visits. Unlike my parents, she asked questions about what I was learning and actually listened to my answers. She noticed things about me that my own parents missed, like my fascination with how computers worked. I discovered my passion for computer science when I was 12. Our school got a new computer lab, and I found myself volunteering to stay after class just to explore the machines. The logical problem-solving felt natural to me, like speaking a language I'd somehow always known but never practiced. When I told my parents I wanted to learn programming, Dad laughed. "That's not a real career for someone like you. It's just playing with computers." Meanwhile, they were driving Andrew to private baseball coaching 3 times a week, convinced he'd be the next major league star despite his obvious lack of athletic talent. Christmas that year was particularly revealing. Andrew received expensive baseball equipment, a professional-grade glove batting cage sessions, and a personalized jersey. I received a box of outdated computer parts my dad had gotten for free from an office upgrade. I tried not to show my disappointment, but later that night, I cried in my bedroom. 2 days after Christmas, Aunt Sylvia visited and slipped me a package, a decent laptop that could actually run current software. "Don't tell your parents," she whispered. "Sometimes it's better to fly under the radar until you're ready to soar." It was the first time I realized I might need to hide my potential from my own family. That laptop became my sanctuary. I taught myself basic programming through free online courses, staying up late after finishing homework. Within 6 months, I'd created my first useful program, a simple database that organized my father's chaotic business files. When I showed it to him, hoping for acknowledgement, he merely grunted. It's about time technology did something practical, never registering that his 14-year-old daughter had created it from scratch. The pattern was set. My achievements would be minimized or ignored, while Andrew's mediocrity would be celebrated as brilliance. I learned to look elsewhere for validation, to teachers, to the quiet satisfaction of solving problems, and to my growing conviction that someday I would build something no one could ignore. High school should have been my time to shine. I entered as a freshman with advanced placement in math and science, but social connections didn't come as easily as academic achievements. Being the quiet girl who preferred coding to cheerleading made me practically invisible in the high school hierarchy. I ate lunch alone most days, using the time to work on programming projects on my trusty laptop from Aunt Sylvia. Everything changed when I met Zoe Phillips in sophomore year computer science. She transferred from a school in California and somehow ended up in the advanced class. When the teacher assigned pair programming projects, we were the only two girls in a class of 25 students, so we naturally gravitated toward each other. "Your code is elegant," she said, looking over my shoulder during our first project. No one had ever described anything I did as elegant before. That simple observation blossomed into my first real friendship. Zoe didn't care that I wore the same 3 sweaters in rotation or that I didn't get invited to parties. She saw value in the things I could create with my mind. Mr. Reynolds, our computer science teacher, became another ally. He had worked in Silicon Valley for 15 years before deciding to teach, and he immediately recognized something in my programming style. "You think differently, Cassandra," he told me after class one day. "Most students follow the examples exactly. You find more efficient paths. That's rare." He began giving me advanced problems and recommending university-level textbooks. For the first time, I felt like my aptitude was an asset rather than something to downplay at home. Meanwhile, my parents' emotional neglect intensified as they focused entirely on Andrew's college prospects. Despite his 2.4 gigapascals and middling SAT scores, they hired expensive college consultants and took him on tours of elite universities. When I mentioned needing $95 for the advanced placement computer science exam, my mother sighed as if I'd asked for a luxury vacation. "We're already stretched thin with Andrew's college applications," she said. "Can't you just take regular classes like normal students?" I paid for the exam with money earned from fixing neighbors' computers. I scored a 5, the highest possible mark. The College Board sent a congratulatory letter to our home. My parents never mentioned it. The state coding competition became my turning point. Mr. Reynolds encouraged me to enter my security algorithm project, which helped identify potential breaches in networks. I worked on it for months, refining and perfecting it while my sleep dwindled to 4 hours nightly. When the results were announced, I had won first place, the first student from our school ever to do so. The awards ceremony was scheduled on the same day as one of Andrew's regular season baseball games. I didn't even bother asking my parents to attend. Mr. Reynolds drove me to the ceremony at the state capitol and sat in the audience cheering loudly when my name was called. Later, he took a photo of me holding my trophy and framed it for his classroom wall. When I arrived home that evening, still clutching my trophy and scholarship certificate, my mother barely looked up from preparing Andrew's post-game protein shake. "How was your computer thing?" she asked vaguely. "I won first place," I said quietly, "and a $5,000 scholarship." "That's nice," she replied. Attention already shifted to Andrew entering the kitchen. "Honey, tell us about your game." Later that night, I overheard them discussing college finances. I stood frozen in the hallway as my father's voice drifted through the partially open door. "Andrew's college fund is looking good, but we'll still need to take out some parent loans to cover the full ride at Michigan." "What about Cassandra's college?" my mother asked. "She can work part-time and take loans like I did," my father replied dismissively. "Besides, she'll probably just go to state. Andrew needs the premier programs to develop his potential." Something hardened inside me that night. I realized I was truly on my own. The next day, I asked Mr. Reynolds to help me apply for every scholarship I could find. I stayed after school 3 days a week, writing essays and gathering recommendation letters, none from my parents, of course. By senior year, I had secured a full-ride scholarship to one of the top computer science programs in the country. When the thick acceptance packet arrived, my mother glanced at it and said, "Well, I guess you won't be around to help with chores anymore." Just before graduation, Aunt Sylvia, my consistent supporter, was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. She had always been my emotional refuge, the one adult who saw me clearly. Now, when I needed her most, she was fighting for her life in a hospital 3 states away. High school graduation night should have been triumphant. Instead, I sat with my cap and gown, listening to relatives fawn over Andrew's acceptance to a mid-tier college, while barely acknowledging my full scholarship. As the evening wore on, I overheard my father telling my uncle, "We only have one child with real potential. The other one just does computer stuff." I slipped away from the party early and packed my belongings for university. I was leaving in 2 weeks and couldn't wait to escape. Whatever lay ahead, it had to be better than being the invisible daughter. Moving into my freshman dorm was a surreal experience. While other students had parents helping carry boxes, setting up bedding, and taking tearful goodbye photos, I arrived alone in an Uber from the airport with 2 suitcases and my laptop bag. My parents had declined to drive me, citing Andrew's college orientation the following week as requiring all their energy and attention. The fact that his school was only 40 minutes from our house while mine was 3 states away was apparently irrelevant. Financial independence meant complete self-sufficiency. My scholarship covered tuition and basic room and board, but anything extra textbooks, winter clothes for the colder climate, even basic toiletries came from my own pocket. I secured a job at the university library within my first week, working 20 hours while carrying a full course load of advanced classes. By midterm, I'd added a weekend job at the campus IT help desk. The punishing schedule took its toll. I developed insomnia, often finding myself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., calculating how many hours I could work while maintaining my perfect GPA. The scholarship required a 3.8 minimum. Anything less meant financial catastrophe. Some nights, anxiety about failing wrapped around my chest so tightly I couldn't breathe, leaving me gasping in the bathroom so I wouldn't wake my roommate. My roommate, Paige Thompson, became an unexpected lifeline. A psychology major from a large, boisterous family in Minnesota, she noticed my exhaustion and isolation when most others didn't. One night, returning from the library at midnight, I found she'd left soup and crackers on my desk with a note, "Humans need food." Revolutionary concept, I know. It became a pattern, small acts of kindness without making me feel like a charity case. When she went home for weekends, she'd return with homemade cookies her mom had sent specifically for me. When I mentioned in passing that I'd never been to a proper Thanksgiving dinner, she immediately called her parents and arranged for me to join their family holiday. "My folks collect strays," she explained with an easy smile. 5 more people at the table just means Dad makes an extra turkey. That Thanksgiving with the Thompsons showed me what family could be: loud, chaotic, but fundamentally supportive. Mr. Thompson asked thoughtful questions about my programming projects. Mrs. Thompson sent me back with containers of leftovers and a hand-knitted scarf. I cried on the bus ride back to campus, mourning the family I'd never had while feeling grateful for the glimpse of what was possible. My academic life gained focus when I met Professor Catherine Winters in my sophomore algorithms class. Unlike other professors who kept rigid boundaries with undergraduates, she invited promising students to weekly discussion groups at her campus apartment. Over tea and homemade scones, we debated cutting-edge developments in the field, speaking as near equals rather than in strict teacher-student hierarchies. After one such session, she held me back as others left. "Your solution to the binary tree problem was unorthodox," she said, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Where did you learn that approach?" I didn't, I admitted. The textbook method seemed inefficient, so I tried something different. A rare smile crossed her face. That's exactly what this field needs, people who don't just follow established patterns. I'd like you to consider a special project under my guidance. That project, creating an algorithm for more efficient database security, became the foundation of my undergraduate research. I worked on it obsessively, finding flow states where hours passed like minutes. For once, my tendency toward hyperfocus became an advantage rather than something to hide. Meanwhile, my parents had completely cut contact. When I couldn't come home for Christmas break due to my work schedule, my mother sent a terse text, "I guess your family isn't a priority anymore." I tried explaining that I needed the income to survive, but the message went unanswered. Occasionally, I'd hear news about Andrew through mutual hometown connections. He dropped out after 3 semesters, despite my parents' continued financial and emotional support. Apparently, he was finding himself while living in their basement and working part-time at a sporting goods store. In the spring of my junior year, I received devastating news from a distant cousin's Facebook post. Aunt Sylvia had passed away after her long battle with cancer. My parents hadn't even bothered to tell me. I later learned they'd held the funeral 2 weeks earlier, a funeral I hadn't been invited to attend. The loss crushed me. Aunt Sylvia had been my only consistent supporter, the only adult who'd seen my potential when I was too young to recognize it myself. The laptop she'd given me years ago still sat on my desk, now supplemented with university equipment, but kept as a talisman of her belief in me. The grief and accumulated stress finally broke through my carefully constructed defenses. One night, Paige found me curled on the bathroom floor, hyperventilating between sobs. She sat beside me without speaking, her arm around my shoulders as years of suppressed emotion poured out. After I'd cried myself into exhaustion, she helped me back to our room and made tea. "You need help," she said firmly. "And before you argue, it's not weakness to need help, it's human." The next day, she walked me to the University Counseling Center and waited in the lobby during my first appointment. Professor Winters adjusted my research deadlines without comment when I explained the situation. For the first time, I allowed myself to lean on others instead of bearing everything alone. Slowly, with therapy and genuine support, I began healing from years of parental neglect. As junior year ended, I had no idea that the coming summer would completely transform my life's trajectory. The email arrived during finals week of junior year. I was buried in exam preparation, surviving on vending machine coffee and 3-hour sleep cycles, when the notification pinged on my phone. Normally, I would have ignored it, but the sender caught my attention, Professor Winters, with the subject line, "Urgent Opportunity." "Cassandra," the message read, "Horizon Technologies has opened applications for their elite summer internship program. I've recommended you personally to the selection committee. This is the most competitive tech internship in the country. Only 5 students nationwide will be selected. Applications close in 48 hours. Details attached." Horizon Technologies was the Silicon Valley unicorn everyone in computer science dreamed of joining. Founded by James Blackwood, a brilliant programmer turned visionary CEO, the company had revolutionized cybersecurity while maintaining ethical standards other tech giants ignored. Their internship program was legendary. Many current executives had started there, and several former interns had launched successful startups with Blackwood's backing. The application requirements were daunting: academic transcripts, recommendation letters, and an original project submission demonstrating innovative thinking. With finals consuming every waking hour, creating a new project seemed impossible. Yet the opportunity was too significant to ignore. I skipped my next 2 exams knowing my grades were strong enough to absorb the hit, and locked myself in the 24-hour computer lab. Fueled by determination and alarming amounts of caffeine, I expanded an algorithm I'd been tinkering with for personal interest. a security system that adapted to user behavior patterns to identify potential breaches before they occurred. For 40 straight hours, I coded, debugged, and refined. When my vision blurred from exhaustion, I napped under the desk for 20-minute stretches before continuing. By the submission deadline, I had a functioning prototype, rough but demonstrating genuine innovation. I submitted the application with trembling hands, then collapsed into bed for 14 straight hours. 2 weeks later, while working my library shift, my phone lit up with an unknown California number. I stepped into the stacks to answer, heart pounding. "Is this Cassandra Mitchell?" a crisp voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "This is Elaine Cho, Talent Acquisition Director at Horizon Technologies. I'm pleased to inform you that you've been selected for our summer internship program." The shelves seemed to spin around me as she detailed the offer: a generous stipend, subsidized housing near their Palo Alto campus, and the opportunity to work directly with development teams on active projects. I managed to thank her professionally, hanging up before sinking to the floor between psychology and philosophy sections, hands covering my mouth to stifle inappropriate laughter. I had done it. Despite everything. Despite everyone. News of my selection spread quickly through the computer science department. Professor Winters hosted a small celebration with her graduate students, presenting me with a sleek new laptop bag for my California adventure. Paige helped me find affordable professional clothing at thrift stores, styling outfits that looked far more expensive than their price tags. 3 days before my departure for California, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over 2 years, my parents' home line. Curiosity overrode caution, and I answered. "Cassie." My mother's voice sounded artificially warm, using a nickname she'd abandoned when I was 12. "We've heard the wonderful news about your internship. We're so proud." The familiar cold feeling settled in my stomach. "How did you hear about that?" "Mrs. Geller's son works in tech, and she mentioned it at Bridge Club. Horizon Technologies. That's quite prestigious, isn't it? Your father and I would love to take you to dinner before you leave. Maybe you could tell us all about this opportunity." The transparently sudden interest after years of silence made my hand tighten around the phone. "I'm busy packing," I replied flatly. "Well, perhaps when you're back in town. You know, your father has some contacts in the technology sector from his business. He might be able to introduce you to some valuable connections." The audacity was breathtaking. After years of neglect and dismissal, they wanted to benefit from my success. "I don't need introductions," I said, voice steady. "I earned this on my own." My mother's tone chilled immediately. "That's a very ungrateful attitude, Cassandra. After all we've done for you." "Which is what exactly?" "We raised you, supported your education. I've been on my own since high school. My scholarship paid for college, and I worked multiple jobs for everything else." "If that's your attitude, perhaps we should make the separation official," she snapped. "You've clearly decided you don't need family." "You made that decision years ago," I replied, surprised by my own calmness. "You can't take away what you never gave." I ended the call and blocked their number, hands shaking but mind clear. 3 days later, I boarded a plane to California, determined to make the most of an opportunity I'd earned entirely through my own merit. The Horizon Technologies campus took my breath away: 6 sleek buildings of glass and sustainable materials arranged around an indoor rainforest atrium. On our first day, the 5 selected interns gathered in the main lobby, trying not to gawk like tourists while sizing each other up. It became immediately clear that I was different from the others. Trevor from MIT casually mentioned his father's venture capital firm. Madison from Stanford discussed growing up in the same neighborhood as 3 major tech CEOs. Raj from Carnegie Mellon described his gap year building wells in developing countries, a volunteer position funded by his family foundation. Then there was me, scholarship student from a middle-class background turned decidedly lower class after being functionally disowned. My clothes were the right style, but from last season's clearance racks. My laptop, while perfectly adequate, lacked the cutting-edge specs of my peers' machines. As we toured the facility and received our project assignments, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Perhaps I didn't belong in this world of privilege and connections. Perhaps family background did matter more than raw ability. That first night in my subsidized apartment, I nearly called Paige to confess my doubts. Instead, I opened my computer and got to work. If I couldn't match their pedigrees, I would simply have to outwork and outthink everyone else. The first week at Horizon Technologies confirmed my suspicions about being the outsider. The other interns formed an immediate social circle meeting for drinks after work and planning weekend excursions to Napa Valley wineries. When they extended obligatory invitations, I declined, citing budget constraints. The awkward, pitying glances that followed made it clear I'd made the right choice in avoiding their social gatherings. Our intern cohort was assigned to different departments based on our applications. While the others received glamorous placements in product development and strategic planning, I was assigned to cybersecurity enhancement, a division other interns had actively avoided due to its demanding reputation and less visible results. My direct supervisor was Ryan Martinez, a brilliant but notoriously difficult team leader, known for his exacting standards and lack of patience for mistakes. During our first meeting, he reviewed my application project with a critical eye. "Your fundamental approach is sound," he said, making notes on his tablet. "But your implementation is inefficient in 3 key areas." He proceeded to dissect my code line by line, pointing out weaknesses I hadn't considered. Rather than feeling defensive, I found myself energized by the critique. Could I restructure the authentication sequence to address those inefficiencies I asked already, visualizing potential solutions? Ryan looked up, mild surprise crossing his features. Most interns spend their first feedback session making excuses, he observed. Yes, reworking the authentication sequence would be a start. Have a proposal on my desk tomorrow morning. I worked through the night in my sparse apartment, ordering cheap takeout and coding until sunrise. The revised algorithm incorporated Ryan's suggestions while adding my own improvements. When I presented it the next morning, dark circles under my eyes, but code elegant and clean, he reviewed it in silence. "This is good work," he finally said. "I've assigned you to the Phoenix project. Team meeting in 30 minutes. Don't be late." The Phoenix project turned out to be a challenging cybersecurity initiative that senior engineers had been struggling with for months. As the only intern on the team, I spent the first few days quietly observing, taking notes, and studying the existing architecture during evenings and weekends. 2 weeks in, during a team brainstorming session about a particularly stubborn security vulnerability, I hesitantly raised my hand. What if we approach this from a behavioral pattern perspective rather than a structural one? I suggested, voice smaller than I intended. If we analyze the sequence of actions preceding previous breaches, we might identify predictive markers. The room fell silent as senior engineers exchanged glances. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Elaborate." I stood and moved to the whiteboard, sketching out a conceptual model as I explained. Traditional security focuses on building stronger walls. But what if we instead focused on identifying the behaviors that precede someone trying to scale those walls? By the session's end, the team had pivoted to my approach. I was assigned to work directly with 2 senior engineers to develop a prototype. The long hours intensified, but for the first time they were driven by excitement rather than necessity. 3 weeks later, during the monthly project review attended by department heads, our team presented the preliminary results. As the most junior member, I wasn't expected to speak. But when technical questions arose about the behavioral modeling component, Ryan unexpectedly turned to me. "Cassandra developed this module. She can best explain the methodology." Heart pounding, I stepped forward and walked the executive team through the system's logic. When I finished, there was a moment of silence before someone at the back of the room asked, "Where did you learn this approach? It's not standard in the field." I didn't learn it anywhere, I admitted. It just seemed like the most logical solution to the problem. After the meeting, I was returning to my desk when an administrative assistant caught up with me. "Mr. Blackwood would like to see you," she said, leading me toward the executive floor. James Blackwood's office reflected his philosophy: minimalist, yet comfortable, with glass walls overlooking the atrium, and no ostentatious displays of wealth or achievement. The man himself sat behind a simple desk, reviewing something on a tablet. At 48, his salt and pepper hair and casual attire belied his status as a tech industry titan. "Cassandra Mitchell," he said, setting down the tablet as I entered. "Your behavioral analysis approach to the Phoenix Project is fascinating." "Thank you, sir." I managed, trying not to visibly tremble. "Ryan tells me you've been working nights and weekends. That you essentially rebuilt our approach from first principles rather than following established security paradigms." I shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean to overstep." "Overstep?" he laughed. "You solved a problem that's had our senior team deadlocked for months. Tell me what drives you to work so hard." The question caught me off guard. Professional answers flashed through my mind: passion for the field, commitment to excellence, desire to learn. Instead, surprising myself, I answered honestly, "I don't have a safety net. Everything I've achieved has been despite obstacles, not because of advantages. I can't afford to be merely good or even excellent. I have to be exceptional just to stay in the game." Blackwood studied me for a long moment. "Hardship creates unique perspectives," he finally said. "Most people here came from privilege. They solve problems from within the existing framework because they've never had reason to question it. But when the framework itself has failed you, you look for solutions outside it," I finished. "Exactly." He nodded approvingly. "I'd like you to continue developing your security model with expanded resources. Ryan will adjust your project scope accordingly." As I turned to leave, he added, "And Cassandra, take 1 day off per week. Exceptional thinking requires rest." "That's not a suggestion." Word spread quickly about my private meeting with the CEO. Suddenly, other interns who had barely acknowledged me were finding reasons to engage. Madison invited me to brunch. Trevor asked for my input on his project. I accepted their overtures politely, but maintained a professional distance, focusing instead on the expanding scope of my work. The breakthrough came in the 6th week of my internship. Working with the expanded resources Blackwood had authorized, I identified a critical pattern in system vulnerabilities that had gone unnoticed. At 2 a.m., after confirming my findings through 3 different testing methodologies, I emailed Ryan with the results. By 8 a.m., my discovery had reached the executive team. By noon, the company was implementing my solution across their entire security infrastructure. By the end of the day, James Blackwood had personally announced that my behavioral security model would become a cornerstone of their next-generation product line. As my model was being implemented company-wide, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Stepping away from my desk to answer, I heard my brother's voice for the first time in years. Cassie Andrew slurred, obviously intoxicated despite the early hour. "I need help." "Andrew, how did you get this number?" "Does it matter? Look, I'm in trouble. I need money, just a loan until I get things figured out." The familiar knot of family obligation tightened in my chest. "What kind of trouble?" "Dad and Mom invested in my business startup. It didn't work out. They're pretty angry, saying I wasted their retirement fund." A bitter laugh escaped me. "The retirement fund they couldn't touch to help with my college." "Hey, not my fault they played favorites," he said defensively. "Anyway, they're broke now and they're blaming me. I just need enough to get to California." I could crash with you, maybe find work out there. The old Cassandra would have found a way to help, would have sacrificed her own stability for family that had never done the same for her. But I wasn't that person anymore. No, Andrew. I can't help you. And you can't stay with me. Seriously, after all the success you're having, you're just going to leave your family hanging. You all left me hanging years ago, I replied, surprised by my own composure. I'm sorry you're struggling, but I won't set myself on fire to keep others warm anymore. I ended the call, hands shaking but mind clear. Later that week, James Blackwood called me to his office again. This time, he had a proposal that would change the trajectory of my life. We'd like to extend your internship through your senior year, he said. Remote work during the school year, returning to campus next summer. Additionally, we'll fund your final year research if you'll focus on expanding your security model. The offer was unprecedented. No intern had ever received such an extension, let alone research funding. As I left Blackwood's office with the official offer letter, I noticed other interns watching with barely concealed envy. For once, I didn't feel the need to minimize my achievement or make myself smaller for others' comfort. I had earned this through capability and perseverance. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel genuinely proud. Returning to university for senior year felt like stepping into a previous version of my life that no longer quite fit. The campus buildings seemed smaller, the challenges less daunting. My resume now included Security Architecture Intern Horizon Technologies, a credential that changed how professors and peers viewed me overnight. The extension of my internship meant I worked remotely for Horizon 20 hours weekly while carrying a full course load. The company provided state-of-the-art equipment for my apartment and arranged my schedule around classes. The generous stipend meant I could finally quit my library and IT jobs, focusing entirely on academics and my Horizon projects. This newfound financial security changed everything. I could afford proper groceries instead of ramen noodles. I replaced my worn-out winter coat. I even started a small savings account, creating the safety net I'd never had before. Not everyone celebrated my success. Several former classmates who had previously ignored me now watched with obvious resentment as companies that had rejected their applications actively recruited me. Anonymous posts appeared on the computer science department's unofficial forum questioning whether I'd earned my position or simply benefited from diversity initiatives. Don't let them get to you, Paige, advised Still, my steadfast roommate and friend. They're just bitter because you shattered their belief that family connections are required for success. Paige remained my emotional anchor despite facing her own struggles. Her father had lost his job, threatening her ability to afford her final year. Without telling her, I anonymously covered her portion of our rent for 2 months until her family stabilized, paying forward the kindness she'd shown me when I was at my lowest. Professor Winters helped structure my thesis project around my work with Horizon, creating a cutting-edge research initiative focused on behavioral pattern recognition in cybersecurity. The company's sponsorship meant access to computing resources and datasets unavailable to other students, but it also attracted scrutiny. Be careful about corporate influence on your research, Professor Winters warned during one of our weekly meetings. Horizon has an excellent ethical reputation, but they're still a profit-driven entity. Don't let commercial interest dictate your intellectual exploration. I took her caution seriously, carefully documenting my methodology to ensure academic integrity while still fulfilling my obligations to Horizon. The balance was delicate but essential for maintaining both relationships. My thesis work consumed me completely. I developed a schedule that maximized productive hours, rising at 5 a.m. for 3 hours of uninterrupted work before classes, remote Horizon meetings in the afternoons, and research deep dives lasting well past midnight. Weekends became indistinguishable from weekdays as the project evolved. The breakthrough came during one such late-night session in February. I had been struggling with an anomaly in my security model. Certain types of breaches weren't following the behavioral patterns I'd identified. At 3:17 a.m., after 36 hours of minimal sleep, I realized the problem wasn't with the model, but with a fundamental assumption in cybersecurity theory. The field had always approached security as a binary state. Systems were either compromised or secure. My sleep-deprived mind suddenly recognized that security existed on a spectrum with varying degrees of vulnerability depending on countless factors. By reconceptualizing the entire framework, my algorithm could adapt to these nuanced states rather than triggering only at critical thresholds. I coded frantically, documenting my approach as I implemented it. When the prototype finally ran successfully at dawn, I stumbled to my bed and collapsed into dreamless sleep. The following afternoon, my phone rang with James Blackwood's direct line, something that had never happened before. "Cassandra, I just reviewed the changes you pushed to the repository last night," he said, without preamble. "This isn't an iteration on your previous work. This is a paradigm shift." "Thank you, sir. It still needs refinement. I'm flying to your campus tomorrow. We need to discuss the implications in person." True to his word, Blackwood arrived the next day, meeting me in a private room at the university's conference center. For 3 hours, we dissected the theoretical foundations of my breakthrough, sketching architectural diagrams and debating implementation strategies. By the end, he had authorized an entire development team to support transforming my concept into a commercial product. This could redefine security infrastructure across industries, he said, as our meeting concluded. "Your name will be on the patent applications with appropriate compensation for your intellectual contribution." As word spread about my breakthrough and Blackwood's personal interest, university politics inevitably surfaced. The computer science department chair, who had previously shown minimal interest in my work, suddenly insisted on being included in meetings and publications. Administrative emails appeared questioning whether my Horizon sponsorship violated university intellectual property policies. Professor Winters ran interference, handling the administrative challenges while I focused on completing my thesis. "Academic politics," she said dismissively. "Your success makes others uncomfortable because it highlights their mediocrity. Keep working, I'll deal with the bureaucrats." As graduation approached and my work gained recognition in industry publications, a familiar number appeared on my phone one evening, my parents' home line. Against better judgment, I answered. "Cassandra," my father's voice sounded uncharacteristically warm, "your mother and I have been thinking about you. We've heard about your success at Horizon Technologies. We're very proud." The familiar hollow feeling formed in my stomach. "After 3 years of no contact, you're proud now." "Now don't be dramatic," he chided. "Families have disagreements. Water under the bridge. Listen, we've been going through some financial difficulties since Andrew's business situation. Your mother and I are wondering if there might be some investment opportunities at Horizon we might explore. Perhaps you could arrange a meeting with some of the executives." The transparent attempt to leverage my success after years of neglect left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it was steady and clear. "Let me understand correctly. You haven't spoken to me in 3 years. You didn't help with my education. You didn't call when I was sick, struggling, or celebrating achievements. Now that I'm potentially useful to you financially, you're reaching out." "That's not fair, Cassandra," my mother's voice cut in, apparently listening on another extension. "We've always supported you. Name one specific way you supported me after high school." The silence was telling. "We're still your parents," my father finally said. "Family helps family. I learned long ago that in our family, support only flows in one direction," I replied. "I won't be arranging any investment opportunities for you. "If that's your attitude," my mother said coldly, "perhaps we should make our separation permanent." "I believe you already did that," I answered, ending the call with surprising calm. I sat in my apartment afterward, expecting to feel the familiar pain of rejection. Instead, I felt something unexpected: relief. Their attempt at reconciliation had nothing to do with love or regret, only financial opportunism. The clarity was oddly freeing. The next morning, I threw myself into finalizing my thesis with renewed focus. Whatever happened at graduation, I would face it with the knowledge that I had built my success entirely on my own merit. The foundation might have been forged in pain, but the structure I'd built upon it was entirely my own design. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect May mornings that seemed designed for new beginnings. I awoke early, reviewing my carefully planned schedule hair appointment at 9, final thesis submission at 11, graduation check-in at 1, ceremony at 3. Everything organized with the precision that had become my trademark. The unexpected knock at my door at 8:15 a.m. wasn't on the schedule. When I opened it, the shock nearly knocked me backward. My parents stood in the hallway, my father in a navy suit I'd never seen before, my mother in an expensive-looking floral dress, both wearing carefully constructed smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Surprise," my mother trilled, stepping forward for an awkward hug. I was too stunned to avoid. We couldn't miss our daughter's big day. "What are you doing here?" I managed, blocking the doorway to prevent them from entering my apartment. "I didn't invite you." "Invite us. We're your parents," my father chuckled as if I'd made a charming joke. "Parents don't need invitations to their child's graduation. Parents who haven't spoken to their child in 3 years absolutely do need invitations," I countered, finding my voice. "How did you even know where I live?" "We called the university, of course. Now may we come in? We've brought you a graduation gift." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside, allowing them into the apartment I shared with Paige. Their eyes darted around, taking inventory of my possessions, lingering on the expensive computer equipment provided by Horizon. "Looks like you're doing well for yourself," my father observed, a calculating edge to his voice. "Your scholarship must be very generous." Before I could respond, my mother pulled out her phone. "We should take some pictures for Facebook. Everyone's been asking about you." The absurdity of the moment, my estranged parents suddenly appearing, performing the role of proud family for social media, left me speechless. I stood woodenly as my mother positioned herself beside me, holding her phone at arm's length for a selfie. "Smile," she instructed. "Thomas, get in the next one." After several forced photos, my father cleared his throat. "Well, we should give you your graduation gift before the ceremony." He produced an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me with exaggerated formality. The envelope was heavy, made of expensive cream-colored paper with my full name, written in my mother's perfect penmanship. "Open it," my mother urged, phone still raised to capture my reaction. Inside was a thick stack of legal documents, the top page bearing the heading "Declaration of Family Disownment" in bold type. As I scanned the contents, my hands began to tremble. The document formally severed all legal family ties, declaring that I had abandoned family values and obligations and was therefore no longer recognized as a legal heir or family member. It required my signature to be finalized. "What is this?" I whispered, though I understood perfectly. "Just a formality," my father said dismissively. "Since you've made it clear you don't want to help your family despite your success, we thought we'd make the separation official. This protects our assets from any claims you might make in the future." "What assets?" I asked incredulously. "You told me you lost everything investing in Andrew's failed business." My mother's smile tightened. "That's not entirely accurate. We've restructured our finances. In any case, this document also releases you from any obligation to support us in our old age. It's really a win-win." The calculated cruelty of the moment crystallized with perfect clarity. They had come not to celebrate my achievement, but to ensure I couldn't benefit from them in any way while simultaneously documenting the estrangement they had created years ago. "Let me understand correctly," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "You've driven 3 states to hand-deliver disownment papers on my graduation day as a gift." "Don't be dramatic, Cassandra," my mother sighed. "We're simply acknowledging the reality of our relationship. Now, the real reason we're here is to discuss a business proposition. We understand James Blackwood himself has taken an interest in your work. We'd like an introduction." The pieces clicked into place. The performative photos, the formal disownment. This was all leverage for access to Horizon's investment opportunities. They were attempting to simultaneously cut me off and use me for connections. "Get out," I said quietly. "Now be reasonable," my father began. "Get out of my apartment. Now." My mother's face hardened. "If you don't help us with this introduction, we'll sign these papers ourselves and file them with the court today. You'll officially have no family." I looked at her for a long moment, seeing clearly for the first time the calculating coldness that had always been there beneath the surface. "I haven't had a family for years," I replied, opening the door. "File whatever you want." After they left, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the disownment papers in my hands. The formal legal language made official what had been emotional reality for years. Yet, seeing it in black and white still cut deeper than I expected. Paige found me there 20 minutes later, still holding the documents. "Cass, what happened? I saw your parents leaving." She stopped when she saw my face. "What did they do?" Wordlessly, I handed her the papers. As she read them, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to fury. "On your graduation day, these people are monsters." She sat beside me, arm around my shoulders. "What can I do?" I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "Help me get ready. I'm not giving them the satisfaction of ruining today." With Paige's help, I prepared for graduation with mechanical precision hair-styled makeup applied to hide evidence of tears, graduation, gown pressed, and cap positioned perfectly. The disownment papers I left on my desk unsigned. My parents' final attempt at control would remain incomplete. At the ceremony, I took my seat among my fellow graduates, scanning the audience despite myself. There they were, 5 rows back, phones raised to document their presence as supportive parents. The performance made me physically ill. As graduate names were called and students crossed the stage, I prepared myself for the brief moment of recognition that would culminate years of struggle. Just before my section was called, the dean approached the microphone with an unexpected announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a surprise guest with us today. Please welcome James Blackwood, CEO of Horizon Technologies, who is asked to say a few words." A murmur ran through the crowd as Blackwood approached the podium. From my seat, I could see my parents' straightening eyes alert with sudden interest. My stomach clenched with anxiety. What was he doing here? "Thank you for accommodating this unorthodox request," Blackwood began. "I don't typically attend graduation ceremonies, but today marks an exception. Among today's graduates is someone whose work will fundamentally transform the cybersecurity landscape for decades to come." My heart pounded as he continued describing my security framework in terms accessible to the non-technical audience. From the corner of my eye, I could see my parents whispering urgently to each other, phones now recording the speech. "Innovation rarely follows a predictable path," Blackwood continued. "Sometimes the most revolutionary ideas come from those who've had to forge their own way. Some succeed despite family, not because of them." I froze at the pointed comment, wondering if it was coincidence or something more. It is therefore my honor to announce that Horizon Technologies is creating a new executive position, Director of Adaptive Security Architecture, to be filled immediately following graduation by Cassandra Mitchell. The audience applauded, many turning to look for the student receiving such unprecedented recognition. When my name was called minutes later to receive my diploma, the dean added, "Our Horizon Technologies scholarship recipient and newest executive." As I crossed the stage, I finally allowed myself to look directly at my parents. Their expressions had transformed from calculated interest to stunned disbelief. They quite literally froze in their seats, my mother's phone still raised but forgotten in her hand, my father's mouth slightly open in shock. In that moment, standing on stage with my degree in one hand and my future secured, I finally felt the weight of their rejection lift from my shoulders. They had tried to disown me at what should have been my proudest moment. Instead, they had only witnessed the ultimate proof that I had never needed them at all. After the ceremony, as graduates reunited with families for photos and celebrations, I spotted my parents pushing through the crowd toward the area where Blackwood was speaking with university administrators. Before they could reach him, 2 Horizon security personnel stepped smoothly into their path. I approached from the side, hearing my father's increasingly aggressive attempts to introduce himself as Cassandra's father and business advisor. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell," I said calmly. They turned faces, instantly arranging into proud parental expressions. "Cassandra, darling, we're so proud," my mother gushed loud enough for nearby graduates to hear. "We were just going to congratulate Mr. Blackwood on his excellent choice of hiring our daughter." "That won't be necessary," I replied. "In fact, I think it's best if you leave now." My father's expression darkened. "Now listen here, young lady. Security will escort you out if needed." I continued, nodding to the Horizon personnel who moved slightly closer. "I believe you've delivered your graduation gift already." "You're making a serious mistake," my father hissed, dropping the proud parent facade. "We're still your parents." "No," I replied, feeling a strange calm. "You're not. You made that very clear this morning. Please leave before this becomes more embarrassing for everyone." As security guided them toward the exits, my mother turned back once, face contorted with fury. "You'll regret this when you have nothing and no one." I watched them go, feeling neither triumph nor pain, just a profound sense of closure. When they were gone, James Blackwood appeared at my side. "Family trouble?" he asked mildly. "Former family," I corrected. "How did you know about that they would choose today to officially disown you?" He smiled slightly. "I didn't. But I've been observing you long enough to recognize the signs of someone who succeeded despite their origins rather than because of them." As graduates and families continued celebrating around us, I realized I'd crossed an invisible threshold. The chapter of my life defined by parental rejection had finally closed. Whatever came next would be entirely of my own creation. The reception following graduation transformed from a bittersweet milestone into something entirely unexpected. As Paige and I navigated through clusters of celebrating families, Professor Winters intercepted us with barely contained excitement. "James Blackwood has requested your presence in the president's conference room," she whispered, eyes bright behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "This is unprecedented." The university's most elegant space had been hastily converted for a private gathering. When I entered, conversation paused as heads turned. University administrators, department chairs, and several Horizon executives I recognized from video conferences. Blackwood stood at the center, gesturing me forward. "The woman of the hour," he announced. "Everyone, most of you know Cassandra Mitchell through her groundbreaking security framework. Today I'm pleased to officially announce that her algorithm will become the foundation of Horizon's next-generation security platform." Applause filled the room as Blackwood continued. "We're creating a new executive division focused on adaptive security architecture with Cassandra as its director, effective immediately upon graduation, which as of 20 minutes ago is now." More applause, accompanied by surprised murmurs. At 22, I would be the youngest executive in the company's history, bypassing traditional corporate ladders entirely. This position comes with full patent rights, Blackwood added, and appropriate compensation reflective of the technology's value. He named a figure that made me grip the back of a nearby chair for support enough to buy a house outright with plenty remaining for investment. As congratulations poured in from people who had barely acknowledged my existence weeks earlier, I struggled to process the sudden elevation. Just hours ago, my parents had attempted to formalize my isolation with disownment papers. Now I stood at the threshold of opportunity beyond my wildest expectations. "You look shell-shocked," Blackwood observed, joining me by the windows after others had dispersed to the buffet. Having second thoughts, processing, I admitted. "It's been a day of extremes." He nodded thoughtfully. "I saw your parents being escorted out. Not a happy reunion." "I take it. They brought formal disownment papers as my graduation gift," I said, surprising myself with the candor. "Apparently, I've abandoned family values by not giving them access to investment opportunities at Horizon." Blackwood's expression darkened momentarily before returning to its usual calm. "Some succeed despite family, not because of them," he repeated his words from the ceremony. "I didn't realize how literally that applied in your case." "May I ask you something that's been bothering me?" I ventured. "Why me?" "There are brilliant programmers everywhere, many with far more experience. Why create an executive position for a new graduate?" He considered the question carefully before answering. "Do you know much about Horizon's founding history?" "Only what's publicly available. You started in your garage, secured initial funding through angel investors, and grew exponentially after your security framework prevented a major banking breach." "The sanitized version?" He nodded. "What's not in the official story is that one of those initial investors was your Aunt Sylvia Mitchell." The room seemed to tilt around me. "My aunt? That's impossible. She was a high school librarian. She couldn't afford." "She wasn't wealthy," he acknowledged. "But she inherited a modest sum from your grandparents and chose to invest it all in Horizon when most considered us a risky venture. She had remarkable intuition about potential." My mind raced, connecting impossible dots. "You knew who I was before I applied for the internship." "Yes and no." Sylvia mentioned having a brilliant niece with a gift for computers years ago, but we lost touch after Horizon took off. When your application crossed my desk, the Mitchell name, and your unique approach to security problems, I wondered if there might be a connection. So the internship, the job offer, it was all because of a family connection after all. The bitter irony threatened to choke me. "Absolutely not," Blackwood said firmly. "I placed you in our most challenging department under our most demanding team leader specifically to test whether you had earned your reputation. I wanted to be certain you weren't receiving special treatment. Ryan had no idea about your potential connection to Sylvia." "Then why tell me this now?" "Because Sylvia made a deathbed request." His expression softened. "She asked me to look out for you if our paths ever crossed. She was worried about you alone without family support." Tears pricked my eyes at the thought of my aunt still trying to protect me even in her final days. She was the only one who ever believed in me. "Not anymore," Blackwood corrected gently. "You've earned the respect of everyone who's worked with you. That's the other reason I'm telling you this now. You deserve to know that someone in your family recognized your worth from the beginning." As the reception continued around us, I stood silently processing this revelation. Aunt Sylvia, who had given me my first real laptop and encouraged my passion when everyone else dismissed it, had unknowingly connected me to the company that would become my future. The symmetry felt like a message from beyond, a final gift from the only adult who had truly seen me. The private moment ended abruptly as commotion erupted near the doorway. Security personnel were blocking my parents, who had somehow bypassed the initial checkpoints, and were demanding entrance. My father's voice carried across the room. "We are Cassandra Mitchell's parents and business representatives. We have every right to be included in discussions about her future." The room fell uncomfortably silent as all eyes turned first to the doorway, then to me. Blackwood raised an eyebrow in silent question. With a slight nod, I indicated for security to let them enter, better to end this publicly and definitively. They swept in with manufactured confidence, my father extending his hand to Blackwood, while my mother beamed proudly at surrounding executives. "Thomas Mitchell, Cassandra's father," he announced. "We're so proud of what our daughter has accomplished with your company's support. We've always encouraged her technical interests, haven't we, dear?" My mother nodded enthusiastically. "We knew from the time she was little that she had special gifts. We sacrificed everything to nurture her talent." The brazen rewriting of history left me momentarily speechless. Professor Winters, standing nearby, made a small noise of disbelief, having witnessed firsthand my struggle without family support. Blackwood regarded them with the cool assessment of someone who had built a career evaluating character. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, your timing is impeccable. We were just discussing your sister Sylvia." My mother's smile faltered slightly. "Sylvia, what does she have to do with anything?" "She was one of our founding investors," Blackwood replied conversationally. "She spoke often about her brilliant niece, who wasn't receiving the support she deserved at home." Color drained from both their faces as he continued. "In fact, just before she passed, Sylvia asked me to watch over Cassandra if our paths ever crossed." Imagine my surprise when her application came across my desk. That's impossible," my father sputtered. "Sylvia had no money. She was just a librarian." "She made wise investments," Blackwood countered. "Something about believing in potential others couldn't see." He turned to me. "Cassandra, I believe these are your parents. Would you like to introduce us formally?" The room's attention focused entirely on me, the executives, the university officials, and most intensely my parents, whose expressions wavered between desperate charm and simmering panic. "These are Thomas and Rebecca Mitchell," I said clearly. "They handed me disownment papers this morning as a graduation gift. They are not my parents in any meaningful sense of the word, and they certainly don't represent me professionally or personally." Gasps and murmurs filled the room as my parents' carefully constructed facade crumbled. "Now see here," my father began. "Security will escort you out," Blackwood interrupted smoothly. "Unless you'd prefer the campus police handle it." As they were led away, my mother turned back, face contorted with fury and humiliation. "This isn't over, Cassandra." "Actually, it is," I replied, feeling a strange calm. "You disowned me, remember? Congratulations on getting exactly what you wanted." After they were gone, the reception resumed with awkward attempts at normal conversation. Professor Winters approached, squeezing my arm supportively. "You handled that with remarkable grace," she murmured. "I've had years of practice," I replied, surprising myself with the hint of humor in my voice. Later, as the reception wound down, Blackwood drew me aside one final time. "Your parents may attempt to challenge your position or compensation," he warned. "They seem the type to pursue what they consider their entitlement." "They have no legal standing," I replied. "They made sure of that themselves. Nevertheless, Horizon's legal team will ensure you're protected. Family complications shouldn't taint your accomplishments." He paused, studying me thoughtfully. "Your aunt would be proud of who you've become, not just your professional success, but your resilience." As I left the reception with Paige stepping into the golden evening light of what had become the most transformative day of my life, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, grief for the family relationship I never had, gratitude for Aunt Sylvia's silent support, and a tentative hope for the future I was now free to build completely on my own terms. The weight of familial obligation had lifted, replaced by the knowledge that I belonged exactly where I was, not through connection or privilege, but through genuine merit. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an imposter waiting to be exposed. I had earned my place, and no one, not even those who should have supported me from the beginning, could take that away. 1 month after graduation, I stood in my new apartment in Palo Alto, surrounded by moving boxes and the scent of fresh paint. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the vibrant city below, a physical manifestation of the heights I'd reached. The space was still mostly empty. I'd never owned enough to fill such a generous floor plan. "This place is incredible," Paige marveled, spinning slowly in the living room. She had flown out to help me settle in before starting her own job at a psychology practice in Minneapolis. "I still can't believe this is your life now." "Sometimes I can't either," I admitted, unpacking kitchenware we'd purchased that morning, my first full set of matching dishes after years of thrift store mismatches. My first week as Director of Adaptive Security Architecture had been a whirlwind of introductions, strategy meetings, and team building. Unlike the internship, where I'd felt constantly aware of my outsider status, executive leadership brought surprising confidence. My ideas were not just heard but implemented. My youth was viewed as an asset rather than a limitation. The doorbell interrupted our unpacking. A courier delivered an overnight envelope requiring signature. Inside, I found my parents' disownment papers, now with my own signature, added and officially notarized, a clear message that I was returning their gift with acceptance. "Closure page asked," watching me review the documents. "Something like that," I replied, filing them away rather than dwelling on their significance. Some wounds were still too fresh to examine directly. My therapy sessions had begun the previous week, a condition I'd set for myself before accepting the executive position. If I was going to lead others effectively, I needed to address the damage from years of familial neglect and rejection. The therapist, Dr. Lin, specialized in adult children of emotionally unavailable parents. "You can't build a healthy future on an unstable foundation," she had observed in our first session. "But you can renovate that foundation while still constructing the life you want." The metaphor resonated with my methodical nature. I approached healing with the same systematic dedication I applied to coding, identifying patterns, testing solutions, implementing changes, and measuring results. Week by week, I began untangling the complex emotions surrounding my family history. My new role brought responsibilities that demanded full attention during working hours, but evenings and weekends slowly transformed into opportunities for self-discovery. What did I actually enjoy beyond work? What foods, music, hobbies spoke to me when survival wasn't the primary concern? I began building a life rather than merely maintaining existence. 3 months into my new position, an unexpected email arrived from a generic addressatonement_attempt@gmail.com. The subject line read simply, "From Andrew." Against better judgment, I opened it. "Cassie," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. I just need to say, I'm sorry. Really sorry, not the bullshit kind Dad always gives. I've been sober for 60 days now. Part of recovery is making amends where possible. I was a terrible brother who benefited from their favoritism without ever standing up for you. I regret that more than anything. Congratulations on your success. You deserved better than our family gave you. Andrew." I stared at the screen, unsure how to process this unexpected communication. Unlike my parents' calculating approaches, Andrew's message contained no requests or manipulative undertones. After considerable thought, I replied with a neutral acknowledgement, neither accepting nor rejecting his apology, but recognizing the courage required to send it. 2 weeks later, we met for coffee at a neutral location. The man who approached my table barely resembled the entitled boy from my memories. Thinner, humbler, with clear eyes and nervous hands, Andrew sat across from me like a stranger. "I didn't think you'd actually agree to meet," he admitted. "I almost didn't," I replied honestly. Our conversation started awkwardly. Years of complicated history, creating a chasm between us. Gradually, as we spoke, something unexpected emerged, a fragile honesty neither of us had experienced within our family system. They pitted us against each other from the beginning, Andrew reflected. Set up a competition where I got praise for breathing while you got criticism for excellence. It messed us both up, just in different ways. You could have chosen differently, I pointed out, not unkindly. I know, he acknowledged. I was weak and selfish. It was easier to accept their favoritism than question it. By the time I realized how twisted it all was, the patterns seemed fixed. Then, after college, when their money was gone and I couldn't be the golden child anymore, he trailed off, shaking his head. Let's just say I got a taste of what you dealt with your entire life. I didn't offer easy absolution, but neither did I close the door on potential reconnection. Andrew was trying to rebuild his life after his own failures and disillusionment. Currently working at a halfway house, helping other recovering addicts, he seemed genuinely committed to creating meaning from his mistakes. I don't expect us to be close, he said as we parted. I just wanted you to know that at least one Mitchell recognizes how extraordinary you are and always were. Before he left, I offered to help him secure an entry-level position at a Horizon subsidiary, not in my division and with no special treatment, but a fair opportunity based on his own merit. The boundaries were clear. I would open a door, but he would have to walk through it and prove himself entirely on his own. 6 months into my new life, as my security framework was being implemented across major systems, worldwide news coverage of Horizon's innovations inevitably included profiles of the programming prodigy behind the technology. Despite my preference for privacy, the company's PR team convinced me that public engagement would help establish credibility in an industry still dominated by older men. The resulting media attention brought inevitable consequences. My parents reached out through increasingly desperate channels as my success became more visible. First came conciliatory emails, then calls to my assistant, followed by unexpected flower deliveries to my office. Each contact attempt contained the same underlying message: they wanted reconciliation, now that my achievements had been publicly validated. After consulting with my therapist, I composed a single definitive response: I am open to beginning a new relationship based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. This would require explicit acknowledgement of past patterns and genuine commitment to different behavior moving forward. Professional counseling would be a necessary component of any potential reconnection. Please consider carefully whether you are interested in an authentic relationship or merely the appearance and benefits of one. They never replied directly, but I occasionally received updates through Andrew about their reactions to my success, a complex mixture of pride in claiming connection to my achievements and bitterness at being excluded from the resulting benefits. Their perspective confirmed that my boundaries were both necessary and appropriate. 1 year after graduation, I hosted a dinner party in my now furnished apartment, celebrating both professional milestones and personal growth. Around my table sat the people who had become my chosen family: Paige, visiting from Minneapolis, where she now ran a successful therapy practice. Professor Winters, retired, but mentoring selected students remotely. Ryan Martinez, now my trusted deputy at Horizon. And several team members who had become friends as well as colleagues. I'd like to propose a toast, Paige announced, raising her glass. To Cassandra, who taught me what real strength looks like. 1 year ago, you faced the ultimate rejection on what should have been your proudest day. Instead of breaking, you built something beautiful from the broken pieces. Glasses clinked as conversation flowed, filling my home with the warmth of genuine connection. Later, as my guests departed, Professor Winters lingered behind. I have something for you, she said, handing me a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph of me at the state coding competition years ago, the event my parents had skipped for my brother's baseball game. Mr. Reynolds stood beside me, beaming with pride at my trophy. "Reynolds sent this before he passed," she explained. "He wanted you to have it." The unexpected gift brought tears, not of sadness, but recognition of how many people had believed in me when my own family couldn't or wouldn't. The family I'd created for myself wasn't a consolation prize, but something more authentic than what biology had provided. That night, after everyone had gone, I stood at my windows overlooking the city lights. The journey from abandoned daughter to powerful executive had left scars that might never fully heal, but they had become part of my strength rather than ongoing wounds. I had learned that true family consisted not of obligatory blood connections, but of chosen bonds built on genuine caring and mutual respect. The disownment papers my parents had presented as a cruel graduation gift had become paradoxically a certificate of liberation, formal recognition that I was free to define family on my own terms. In losing what had never truly supported me, I had gained the space to create something infinitely more valuable. I no longer needed to prove my worth to people incapable of recognizing it. My validation came from within, from knowing that every step of my journey, every obstacle overcome, every achievement earned had been authentically mine. Not gifted, not inherited, not handed over through privilege or connection, but built through resilience, intelligence, and determination. That, I realized, was the truest graduation of all. How did my story make you feel? Have you ever had to create your own path when those who should have supported you didn't believe in you? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming obstacles and finding success against the odds. Remember, sometimes the family we build is stronger than the one we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I hope you find the strength to create your own success story, whatever challenges you might face.